Hey guys, what's up? So let's get right into it. We're going to be building a deck. So I'm going to show two different ways too. The first way is kind of the in-game should work with everybody way. It's a little bit slower than the second way, but it's way less involved because I uploaded all the cards we know so far in the current versions right into the game. So if you open up your Tabletop Simulator game, because you're subscribed to the Steam page, the deck is now loaded off to the right in this little tiny little pile here, and it's a tiny pile for a reason. I'll get into that in a second, but we have all the cards there. If I just open it up and search quick, it is alphabetical, but I think moving it just shuffled it around a bunch. But I promise it's alphabetical when you grab it at first. So the first less involved way is obviously we have it loaded up. We have our cards here. So let's say we're trying to make a water deck. And we're gonna run Sluggle in it. We're gonna run Foamy in it. We're gonna run Tadpuff in it. We're gonna run Aphros in it. So on and so forth. Majesty, Globby. Again, hopefully it's all alphabetical when we get there. But so here's our example, right? So we want to make a deck with these cards. And the reason I kept them small is so that you can kind of manipulate them all on this board. You have all this space to kind of work with manually, and we're going to make a deck like this. So, all right, let's Sluggle. Let's say we want to have 3 Sluggle in the deck. We have a Sluggle card, we're going to copy it, and we're going to Control V to paste it, or right click paste it. Control V will let you do it manually like this, and delete to get rid of cards. So now we have 3 Sluggle. And then we're going to also run 3 Foamy, so I'm going to do either copy here, or I can press Control C with the card, and then Control V to place it. The next one, right? Now, do this, let's say we're going to do 2 Aphros in the deck, and some Tadpuffs, and 3 Globbies, and 2 Majesty. So let's say this is our deck. Now, obviously, you'd have more cards, but for argument's sake, this is our deck, so I'm not here actually making a giant deck. We're going to pile all of our cards together. They want to stick. Sometimes they don't like to cooperate. Sometimes I find the best way to get them to stick is so there's those snap points in the deck zones. So we'll just pile all of our cards into one deck. Again, I'm just going to use these snap points to make it easy. Don't know why these cards don't want to all connect. Sometimes they do. So here's our deck, right? And because we're using assets from the game that's already in the game, from you're just downloading the game through your subscription on the Steam page, you don't have to do any fancy uploading because if you go look at the files quick, they're all coming straight out of the Steam cloud. So there should be no issue with importing files this way. That's why it's a lot easier. So now we have our deck, right? We can flip it over. If we want to make it bigger, you can hold the plus key while highlighting the deck, minus key while holding the deck makes it smaller, or you can right click and do scale, and you can hit up or down a bunch of times to make the deck the size you want. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. So now we have our deck. We're going to save it. So you could do all this in a single player lobby, or you can do it in a multiplayer lobby if you want to get someone else to help you build the deck or whatnot, do it in multiplayer. But you can do it in single player and it should be fine. So we're going to go to save object down here. And now that we need to name the object. So let's name it Majesty Test 123, and we're going to save it. So now it's not saved to the game, it's saved to your computer. So if you go into objects, in your saved objects, you will have the deck saved here. So we just called this, what, Majesty 123? Here it is, Majesty Test 123, right? So now if we click and drag, we can drag that deck out into play. If you're not the host can give you permissions. So in a multiplayer lobby, they would click your name here, and there would be a permissions button, and they'd have to give you permissions, and you'll be able to import objects. And to import objects is literally just dragging it out of your folder here under your saved objects onto the board. And again, if you use the cards from this 82 card pile here, it will hopefully work. I tested it once, it worked fine. Be able to just plop them out because all the assets are already loaded onto the game itself. There's no weird uploading, it should work fine. Now, this is the easy way. And then obviously you'd make a 40 card deck, and then you'd have to do the same thing for your spirit deck and save it as well. So you see some of these decks I have here that are the ones that I imported to here. So you have Imperial Spirits, Imperial deck, Strato deck, Strato Spirits. Make your two decks, do the same thing. I would suggest you can grab the spirits from the spirit decks. I didn't upload the spirits because I figured, oh, there's plenty in the decks here. You could literally, if you want to, just grab one of these spirit decks and use that as your deck for spirits too. And you just copy how many spirits you need, make the deck, save it. Fairly straightforward. Now, the other, a bit more complicated way is to go into your files. So I'm just going to quickly reset this board. So the other way to make a deck is we're going to have to go to our files. We're actually going to close the game here. And you might get a little jarring thing, blah, 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 blah. So let's go. So now we're on our Steam library page, right? And we want to build the deck while we're not in the game. We're going to go to our tabletop simulator. I'm going to right click on it. We're going to go to Manage, Browse Local Files. Now there's other ways to get to it, but that's the easy way I found. We're going to go to the Modding folder, the Deck Builder folder, and we're going to Tabletop Simulator Deck Editor, and we're going to run it. So now we're running our tabletop deck editor, right? You'll see I have some other stuff that I was testing around with earlier. We're going to create a new deck. Width 10, height 7 is fine. And we're going to press OK. So now we have a blank screen. What do? We're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Add Cards. This is where you're going to need images. Now, if you go into our Discord under Celestial General Chat, you can find all these card images in the General Chat pins under where it says tag there, or I will probably link it down in the description below as well. So, pardon me, we're doing this live. I have tag. Okay, sorry. Now, so if you need to get the card images, grab them from the Discord. I'll probably put a link to the Google Drive for the images below as well. Theoretically, you do this to any image. But yeah, so you get your image. Let's say we're making a deck and we need ambrosia in it. So we're going to add a card to it. And it'll snap into this kind of menu when you add one card to it. Now, if you want to put 3 ambrosias, you can do the same thing as we did in the other thing. You can hit Control C to copy the card. See how it's highlighted in red? We're copying this card. We can go to Zone 2, Control V to paste, Control V to paste, or you can just keep going to File, Add Cards, and do it one at a time like this, right? And we're going to keep going until we have 40 cards. Just for safety, for speed's sake, I'm just going to do this till we get 40. Just to show you exactly how it works step by step. Whoops. You're going to get error messages if you try to overwrite a card. If you hit yes, it'll overwrite. If you hit no, it won't overwrite. So now we have a 40 card deck. Wow, so broken. Ampups and Ambrosius. We're going to go to File. Now, if you want to come back to this file to edit it in the future, I would suggest you save it. So you'd name it something like Ambrosia edit file, so I can come back to an edit if I need to, right? And now we want to, in order to actually get this deck, we're going to have to export it. I honestly don't know what all this junk means, but you can't really click off one of these without doing that. I'm not really sure, but if you hit export, it'll give you another file to save. So I'm going to go to my pictures. I'm saving all my things in camera roll, don't ask me why. And now we have to save the file as one of these image files. So you see, we're going to get an image file that is going to just have all the cards that we're trying to build our deck with spaced out like you see here. So we'll call this Ambrosia Final, right? Because this is what we want to import in tabletop. Save it. And then you do this, then you have to make your spirit deck. You do it in the same fashion, except you'll do it with 20 cards instead of 40. I think that's fairly straightforward because again, you need your 2 decks. This is one deck. You could also theoretically, put your spirits down here and do these 20 cards, but then you get into a little hiccup where when you're importing the deck, you'd have to make sure you're importing 70 cards and you'd have these 10 blank black cards you'd have to remove out it's a little awkward. I would just do it as two separate files. Anyway, we're not going to save this because I don't want to save all those ambrosias there. And do I want to save? No. So we're going to close that out. So now we have the files that we need for tabletop. We're going to go back into tabletop. We're going to go single player. We actually don't necessarily need to go into our workshop file. We can do it right here. So now we want to import our deck files. We're going to go to Objects, Components, Cards, Custom Deck. I think that's fairly straightforward, right? Now we have Custom Deck. We're going to plop it down and left click to put it down, and then right click to pop up the Custom Deck menu. Face is the front of the card, so that's what your actual ELESTRALs are, right? So we're going to hit this folder. We're going to have to go to the file that we just made. So we want our Ambrosia deck, and we're going to double click it. And you're going to get two options, cloud and local. If you hit local, the files will not go onto Steam, and if you play with this deck, nobody will see this. So you do not ever hit local, because you will never be able to play in a multiplayer online lobby with that deck, and you'd have to rebuild the deck through this custom deck import process. Not the end of the world, but if you hit local, you will not see. You will see the cards correctly. Your opponent will just see blank cards on the field. They won't see anything. So we're going to upload this to cloud. We're going to name it, and we're going to upload it. Now the upload will give it a Steam cloud URL. And we're going to upload the back. This is the back of the cards, right? So we're going to go, sorry, I have my card back and everything. You could theoretically put anything as your card back, but I have the Celestial card back downloaded, again, to the cloud, upload it. There's the Steam Cloud HTTP for it, right? With the same height, same. Here's the interesting part. So this number slider here, if you have it at 70, you will have your 40 cards and 30 black blank cards that you'll have to remove before you save the deck. So make sure you put this slider at the deck size. So for your actual deck it's 40, your spirit deck make sure it's 20. That's all. Pretty straightforward. And we're going to import it. So now, if everything went right, we have the back as the celestial thing, and the front will be our cards. And there's our ambrosias, and then there's our ampups, and then the rest are ambrosias. So now we have our deck imported, right? We're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to take our deck, we're going to right click it, save the object. We're going to name the object ampup op, and we're going to save that deck, right? So if we go into objects, we go into save objects. It should now be in our saved objects, and we can drag it into our games. And if we look at the deck's files, there's still the cloud files, so everybody should be able to see these in a multiplayer match. Now, again, to import these decks, your host, or if you're the host, make sure you give the other person the matchup on the right the ability to do that through promoting them, or sometimes we've had a little issue with promoting. You could also switch. You could also have the host put their deck in and then switch hosts, have it reload, have them host it, and have them put it in. That's a little bit janky, but it's an option if you're having trouble. The other thing to note is because you're importing some more files when you put in the deck in, if you do it this way, where we went through, made our own file, imported the deck that way, when you put this deck into the board, it may take a minute or two for the deck to load for your opponent. So at first, they might just see a bunch of white cards with black backs. And then after a couple minutes, it should load up for them. As the host, you should see a little percentage indicator by the name on the top right that tells you how loaded they are. We had a little bit of issue in testing with the promoted player importing their custom deck that you can get around by using that stack of 82 cards in the first way I showed you how to build a deck. That's it pretty much. That's how you make the decks that you want to make. So if I go back, right? So yeah, you can just either, take those 82 cards or do the long way I showed you just now. Both work fine. Personally, I'm probably going to just be using the 82 cards here because I like to kind of be able to physically manipulate my deck and be like, oh, actually, let me take one out and do this and see how the deck looks like with something else. But it works. And for any other way you want to work it out, make it work. Make sure you save those things as an imported file, not as a local file. Again, local files will never show up for the other player in your game. But yeah, that's how you can make your decks in here. Import them away, play with some custom decks. I will update cards occasionally as I can, but that will probably not update your card text. It might not, it probably won't. And then a couple of quick things, if you haven't seen yet, I do have the PDF for how to play here. And obviously we have all the decks here, and some thank yous to everyone over there and some other notes. But yeah, that's about it. So you guys have a great day. I'll probably make some other videos sometime later this week. I might make one more video tonight if I have time. But other than that, you guys have a great one. And go play